Hello friends, how are you? Shall we start our class today? So let's go. Lisa stared out of the window as rain drizzled down, tracing streaks on the glass. The once cozy apartment now felt more like a shell of what her marriage had become. Anthony, her husband of 6 years, sat at the kitchen table, absorbed in his laptop. His brow furrowed as he muttered something about quarterly reports, completely oblivious to her presence. Their relationship had once been a whirlwind of passion and shared dreams, but over the years, Anthony had become a man consumed by his career. Late nights at the office and curt conversations became the norm. When he was home, his demeanor was cold and harsh, his tone often cutting when he spoke to Lisa. Gone were the gentle touches and loving words that had once made her feel cherished. Lisa, on the other hand, felt like a ghost in her own home. Her attempts to reignite their connection were met with indifference or, worse, irritation. She had tried to communicate her feelings, but Anthony dismissed her concerns, claiming he was doing it all for their future. The loneliness was suffocating, leaving her yearning for the warmth and affection she no longer received. She thought about the younger version of herself, the Lisa who laughed freely and lived with a spark in her eyes. That Lisa felt like a stranger now. She had buried her desires and emotions under the weight of Anthony's disregard, convincing herself that this was simply how marriage evolved. But a nagging voice inside her refused to be silenced. Was this really all there was? The question lingered, heavy and unsettling, as Lisa clutched her coffee mug and stared into the gray horizon. Little did she know, her life was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and herself. The bar hummed with the sounds of laughter and music. Lisa hadn't planned on going out, but her friends had insisted. As she sipped her drink, she tried to ignore the pangs of guilt for leaving Bruce, her 5-year-old son, with Anthony. Tonight, she wanted a break from the suffocating monotony of her life. Her friends chatted animatedly, but Lisa felt herself drifting into her thoughts until she noticed him. A man stood near the counter, casually leaning against it as he spoke to the bartender. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something about him, an air of confidence, a spark in his smile. His name, she later learned, was Bruce. Lisa hadn't realized she was staring until their eyes met. A flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, passed between them. Embarrassed, she looked away, but not before he smiled and made his way over. "Hi, I'm Bruce," he said, his voice smooth but warm. Lisa hesitated, then introduced herself. Their conversation began innocently enough, just small talk about the weather and the bar's signature cocktails. But soon it took on a deeper tone. Lisa found herself laughing, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in what felt like ages. Bruce had an uncanny ability to make her feel seen, like she mattered. He listened intently as she spoke, his gaze steady and unflinching. For the first time in years, Lisa felt alive. By the end of the evening, her cheeks hurt from smiling, and her heart fluttered in a way she thought it never would again. As she left the bar, Lisa couldn't shake the thought of Bruce from her mind. It was just a chance encounter, she told herself, but something in her heart whispered otherwise. Lisa told herself it was just one night, a fleeting moment that wouldn't linger. But Bruce had awakened something inside her she couldn't suppress. A week after their first encounter, she found herself sitting across from him again, this time in a secluded cafe, far from her neighborhood. "So tell me," Bruce said, his lips curving into that irresistible smile, "what's a woman like you doing in a place like this with a guy like me? Lisa rolled her eyes playfully, trying to ignore how her pulse quickened under his gaze. A woman like me? What's that supposed to mean? Bruce leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Smart, beautiful, clearly out of my league. You're here because? Maybe I just needed a change of scenery, Lisa replied, her tone light, though the weight of her words lingered in the air. As the hours passed, their conversation deepened. Lisa told him about her strained marriage, the loneliness that clung to her like a shadow, and the version of herself she felt she had lost. Bruce listened intently, his eyes locked on hers. You don't deserve to feel invisible, he said softly. You're meant to shine, Lisa. I can see it. She laughed nervously, looking down at her coffee. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it should be, Bruce replied, his voice steady. Maybe life's too short to settle for anything less than this. Lisa's heart raced at his words. She knew what he was offering: freedom, passion, a chance to feel alive again. But with every stolen glance and whispered confession, guilt crept in like a thief. One evening, as they walked through a quiet park, Lisa stopped abruptly. Bruce, it's crazy. I'm married. I have a son. I can't. I know, Bruce said, cutting her off gently. He turned to face her, his expression earnest. But tell me this, when you're with me, do you feel alive? Lisa hesitated, her throat tightening. I do, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Then don't let that go, Bruce said, his hand brushing against hers. For the first time in years, Lisa felt like someone truly saw her. But even as she allowed herself to revel in the feelings Bruce awakened, a storm brewed within her. She was playing with fire, and she knew it. The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting streaks across the bedroom walls. Lisa stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, her breath caught in her throat. Positive. No, she whispered, as if the words alone could undo what she was seeing. Her mind raced. How could this be happening? They had been so careful, or so she thought. She sank to the floor, her back pressed against the bed frame, overwhelmed by the weight of the discovery. The sound of Bruce's voice echoed in her mind. Lisa, you deserve to be happy. Happiness. Was that still possible now? She knew she couldn't tell Bruce, not yet. This secret was hers alone to bear, at least for the moment. Later that evening, Lisa met Bruce at their usual spot, a secluded park bench under the shelter of sprawling oak trees. She tried to stay composed, but her hands fidgeted nervously. Hey, you okay? Bruce asked, his concern evident. Lisa hesitated, forcing a tight smile. Just a lot on my mind, that's all. Bruce's eyes searched hers, but he didn't press further. Instead, he reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. You don't have to go through things alone, you know? I'm here. His words sliced through her, filling her with both comfort and dread. She wanted to tell him, but what could she say? This child wasn't just theirs. It was her life, her marriage, her deception, all intertwined. That night, as Lisa lay beside Anthony in their silent bedroom, her thoughts were consumed by the secret growing inside her. She made a decision: she would keep this truth buried for now. Anthony wouldn't know, Bruce wouldn't know, and she would carry this burden alone. But secrets have a way of unraveling, no matter how tightly they're held. Lisa couldn't imagine the consequences awaiting her when the truth finally emerged. Years passed, and Lisa became an expert at living two lives. To Anthony, she was the devoted wife and mother, raising their son, Bruce Jr., with unwavering dedication. But every time she looked into her son's eyes, she saw the undeniable resemblance to his namesake, a constant reminder of the secret she carried. Anthony, as usual, remained engrossed in his work. He seemed to notice little about the household beyond the occasional acknowledgement of their son's milestones. Lisa convinced herself that her deception was justified, that she was protecting her family from a truth that could shatter their fragile balance. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Bruce Jr., now 5 years old, innocently asked, "Mommy, why don't I have hair like Daddy?" Lisa's hand froze midair, the fork hovering inches from her plate. "Well," she began, forcing a smile, "you take after me in some ways, sweetie." Anthony barely looked up from his phone. "It's genetics, kid," he mumbled before returning to his emails. The moment passed, but Lisa's heart raced. Children's questions were innocent, but they had a way of cutting straight to the truth. She knew it was only a matter of time before the carefully constructed facade she had built began to crack. Her moments of solitude were spent in anxiety, replaying every decision she had made. Lisa tried to avoid Bruce altogether, knowing that being around him only stirred feelings of guilt and longing. But Bruce, ever patient and understanding, would occasionally reach out. "You don't call anymore," Bruce's voice came through the phone one evening. "Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," Lisa replied hastily, pacing the living room while Anthony worked late at the office. "I've just been busy." "Lisa," Bruce said, his voice soft yet firm, "you can't keep running from this. Whatever this is." But Lisa wasn't ready to face what this truly meant. Not for Bruce, not for Anthony, and certainly not for herself. Each passing day added another layer to the web of lies. It was only a matter of time before the threads began to unravel, pulling everyone into the storm she had tried so desperately to avoid. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when everything changed. Lisa was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, while Anthony played with Bruce Jr. in the living room, a rare occurrence. She glanced over occasionally, feeling an odd mix of contentment and unease. "Bruce," Anthony called out, holding up a toy car. "Do you remember where you got this one?" Bruce Jr. tilted his head deep in thought. "Uncle Bruce gave it to me," he exclaimed brightly. Lisa froze, her knife hovering over the cutting board. Her heart sank and her blood ran cold. Anthony looked up, his brow furrowed. "Who's Uncle Bruce?" Lisa turned slowly, gripping the edge of the counter for support. "He's a friend," she said, her voice barely audible. Anthony's eyes narrowed. "A friend? Since when? I don't recall you mentioning an Uncle Bruce." Before Lisa could respond, Bruce Jr. chimed in again, oblivious to the tension. "He's funny. And he has the same eyes as me." The room fell silent. Anthony stood, his gaze shifting between Lisa and Bruce Jr. "What is he talking about?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Lisa opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She felt the walls closing in around her as Anthony's expression darkened. "Lisa," he said sharply, stepping closer, "I want the truth. Now." Lisa's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair. "It's not what you think," she began, her voice trembling. Anthony cut her off. "Don't lie to me. You've been keeping something from me, haven't you?" The truth spilled out in fragments, each word heavier than the last. Lisa confessed everything. Her loneliness, her affair with Bruce, and the devastating truth about Bruce Jr.'s parentage. Anthony's face twisted with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You lied to me for years," he said, his voice shaking. "You let me believe he was mine." Bruce Jr. watched in confusion as his parents' world crumbled around him. Lisa reached out, but Anthony pulled away, his jaw clenched. "I can't do this," he muttered before storming out of the house. As the door slammed shut, Lisa buried her face in her hands, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. The silence in the house was deafening after Anthony stormed out. Lisa sat motionless on the couch, her arms wrapped around Bruce Jr., who was sobbing quietly. "Mommy, why is Daddy mad?" he asked, his innocent voice trembling. Lisa brushed his hair gently, her throat tight. "Daddy just needs some time, sweetheart," she said softly, though the words felt hollow. Hours passed before Anthony returned. His face was etched with exhaustion and anger. He didn't speak as he walked past Lisa and into their bedroom, slamming the door shut behind him. The next morning, Lisa found Anthony in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression unreadable. She hesitated in the doorway before stepping inside. "Anthony," she began cautiously, "we need to talk." He looked up at her, his gaze icy. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "I'm sorry," Lisa said, tears pooling in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you. I was lost, and I..." "Lost?" Anthony interrupted, his voice rising. "You lied to me for years, Lisa. You let me believe Bruce was mine. Do you even understand what you've done?" Lisa flinched at his words. "I was scared," she admitted. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I was protecting us." "Protecting us?" Anthony laughed bitterly. "You weren't protecting anyone but yourself." The argument escalated, emotions boiling over as years of suppressed resentment and pain came flooding out. Anthony accused Lisa of betrayal, while Lisa pleaded for understanding. Their voices echoed through the house, loud enough that Bruce Jr. appeared in the doorway, his small frame trembling. "Stop yelling," he cried, tears streaming down his face. "Please stop." The sight of their son broke the tension. Anthony turned away, his shoulders slumping as he exhaled heavily. Lisa knelt down and hugged Bruce Jr. tightly, her heart aching for the turmoil she had brought into his young life. Anthony grabbed his coat and keys, pausing at the door. "I need space," he said curtly, avoiding Lisa's gaze. "Don't wait up." As the door closed behind him, Lisa sank to the floor, holding Bruce Jr. close. She knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but she also knew she couldn't undo the damage she had caused. The fallout of her choices was only just beginning. Lisa sat alone in the quiet house, the echoes of her choices reverberating through her mind. Bruce Jr. was asleep in his room, his tear-streaked face softened in peaceful slumber. Anthony's absence hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the gulf that now separated them. Days turned into weeks, and while Anthony stayed away, Lisa knew she couldn't avoid the inevitable. She needed to confront the man she had hurt and give him the answers he deserved. Anthony finally agreed to meet, choosing a neutral cafe far from their home. Lisa arrived early, her hands trembling as she gripped her coffee cup. When Anthony walked in, his expression was stoic, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. "Thank you for coming," Lisa said quietly as he sat across from her. He didn't respond, waiting for her to speak. Lisa inhaled deeply, summoning the courage she had long lacked. "I know I've broken your trust, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know that everything I did, everything, was out of fear and desperation." Anthony leaned back, his jaw tightening. "You could have told me," he said flatly. "You had years to tell me. Why didn't you?" "I was scared you'd leave," Lisa admitted, her voice trembling. "Scared of what it would do to Bruce Jr., to our family. I thought I could keep the secret buried, but I was wrong. Antony's expression softened slightly, though his anger remained. Lisa, I loved you. I trusted you. And now I don't even know who you are. Lisa blinked back tears, her heart aching at his words. I still love you, Antony. But I know I've destroyed what we had. If you can't stay, if you can't forgive me, I understand. The weight of the moment was suffocating. Antony sighed heavily, his gaze fixed on the table. I don't know if I can forgive you, Lisa. But I need time to figure out what's next, for me, for Bruce Jr., for us. Lisa nodded, understanding that this was the best she could hope for. She had shattered their world, and now it was up to Antony to decide if it could be pieced back together. In the days that followed, Lisa focused on being the best mother she could be to Bruce Jr., who remained blissfully unaware of the storm surrounding his parents. She reached out to Bruce, not to rekindle their past but to make peace. Their conversations were brief, honest, and filled with closure. Months later, Antony returned home, not with promises of reconciliation, but with a determination to co-parent Bruce Jr. and navigate their new reality together. Their relationship was fractured, but both were committed to putting their son's happiness first. Lisa's journey wasn't one of redemption but of acceptance. She had learned that the choices she made out of fear could lead to consequences she might never fully repair. Yet in the cracks of her broken life, she found strength and the will to move forward, one day at a time. The weeks following Antony's return were filled with an unfamiliar sense of normalcy. Though their relationship remained fractured, both Lisa and Antony focused on one shared priority: Bruce Jr.'s happiness. Lisa enrolled in counseling, determined to understand the choices that had led her down such a destructive path. She wanted to break free from the cycle of guilt and find clarity for herself and her son. Her sessions were raw and painful, but they also became a source of strength. Antony, for his part, threw himself into fatherhood in a way Lisa hadn't seen before. He spent hours teaching Bruce Jr. how to ride a bike, cheering him on at school events, and simply being present. It was clear that, despite everything, Antony's love for the boy remained unwavering. One afternoon, as they sat together at Bruce Jr.'s soccer game, Antony broke the silence between them. "You're trying," he said, his voice softer than Lisa expected. "I can see that." Lisa looked at him, surprised. "I owe it to both of you," she said honestly. Antony nodded, his gaze fixed on the field. "I'm still hurt, Lisa. But I don't want Bruce Jr. to grow up in a home filled with anger and resentment. He deserves better than that." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lisa allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Their marriage might never return to what it once was, but there was a chance to build something new, something rooted in honesty and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Lisa reached out to Bruce one last time. Their conversation was brief but significant. Bruce expressed his wish for Lisa and her family to heal, and Lisa thanked him for the light he had brought into her life, even if it had come at a cost. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over the soccer field, Lisa felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had the strength to face it, one step at a time. It's great to see you here. Tell me in the comments what you thought of the story and what level of difficulty it was for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss new stories, and like if you liked it. I'll see you next time. Bye.